Hayes thought it was really important to keep the chemistry building with this group, which is why we didn't really see any rotation outside of Tierna Davidson, who had to miss the match due to an injury. So, Tony, I'm curious your thoughts on that. What did you make of the way that Emma Hayes lined this group up?
Yeah, I understand the rationale behind it, right? You haven't had a lot of time. The team's growing into the tournament. Clearly, there weren't any physical issues with these players outside of making the, Emily Sonnet change that we knew was going to happen. I think, though, she took a risk, right, with a couple of players, and one of those was Sam Coffey, and this one didn't work out for her. So you now go into the quarterfinals with your starting number 6 that's not available for you. The person that you thought was the connector between the front and the back is not available for you. And I don't think Sam Coffey had a great game yesterday. You guys know how much of a fan I am of her. I was the one early on that said I think she needs to be in this group. Because I think she got rattled a little bit by the yellow card. You go into the game, you're sitting on a yellow, and it's a silly foul. It's in an area where it's not dangerous, and you pick up the yellow card. And I still think the referee, in a lot of ways, was trying to put a stamp on the game early. So this one was a yellow, and probably didn't manage that part of it right. But in the end, you're going to miss her. So we know there's one change at a minimum coming for this side. But I thought good game. They played well. An Australia side that clearly was going to battle to the end. You're fighting for your Olympic life, right? And we know they're a talented team, and in the end, they got the result that they needed.
I'm not a fan of a team that knows that a draw will get them through, like Australia, and they decide from the outset to play for a draw. Because when their backs were against the wall, they played better, and they almost got it done, because it's probably more of a mental lapse in the United States in those final moments of the game. But had Australia had a different mindset going into this game, I think it would have been different. But you can't blame the U.S. for that, right? You play the opposition that's in front of you, and throughout the 3 games, the United States were great. They took care of business. They got the job done. They were in control mostly for the 3 games. It was an open match against Zambia. It was more quality player for player against Germany. And then you have a low block in Australia that you managed to break down, because the U.S. was struggling to break down teams that would sit in a low block. Case in point, the Costa Rica friendly before going into the Olympics. And even before that, when I remember a friendly against China, maybe it was the doubleheader against China in December.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, and the U.S. figured it out. And I like this mentality that Emma Hayes were discussing yesterday. If there were going to be any subs, we would imagine that it was going to be the same team. Yes, the tournament is grueling, but these are professional athletes. I know they're in the middle of a season, but they're built to sustain this type of rhythm for one more week when the gold is up for grabs. Hopefully the U.S. is in that game.
Yeah, and especially being so early under Emma Hayes, you want to keep the momentum going. You want to keep finding out other parts where her tutelage could help. And having a moment where maybe you make too many subs, I feel like would have been a little bit of a gap there. Also, for me, I think they've shown you how quality they can be against multiple different types of competitions, whether it's a Zambia who is going to, sit back and counter versus an Australia who's just going to park the bus for large portions of the game, or whether it's Germany, one of the favorites to win this whole competition and just has a ton of quality. They've shown you they can shine under each of those circumstances. So whoever's coming up next for the U.S. has to have that little bit of fear. They're like, damn, they've proven themselves against every type of competition. What else can we do to try to stop this?
Especially yesterday against a low block, because that going into the competition, as you touched on, Nico, was a big sticking point with this U.S. team. Could they break down a low block? And that scoreless draw against Costa Rica in the final send-off game, I think, put a bad taste in people's mouths, because the U.S. created a lot of chances. They also just weren't clinical. So the fact that they could go up against a team really going all in on the defensive front and find 2 goals in the game and get the win bodes well for the U.S. What did you see, Alexis, that maybe was a bit different in how the U.S. were able to break down Australia yesterday?
I think for me, it just versus Costa Rica 0-0.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you just saw being clinical in front of goal. I think you also see what Trinity Rodman really does when she gets the ball at her feet and has the confidence to express herself, which I don't think we saw so much under Vlatko, which is she draws so much attention from the defenders that she creates space for everyone else. Sometimes she uses it for herself. Sometimes she's really smart about getting a cross in. To me, this front 3 have just proven that they are absolutely dynamic. And Lynn Williams coming off the bench is what a luxury to have a superstar like Lynn Williams.
The Cooligans, the nickname for
The Holy Trinity?
Yeah.
Hey, I like that.
That was a combo, but that was Christian. Shouts to Christian.
That was really good. I really liked it.
Yeah, to me, it gives a little bit too much props to one of the players because their name in there, but kind of deserved at the same time.
Yeah.
A lot of nicknames that you could give to this dynamic front three, and then with the addition of Lynn Williams off the bench. But Tony, Sam Coffey missing out on this next game in the quarterfinal when the U.S. take on Japan is a huge loss for the United States, and now suggests that we're going to see some sort of change in midfield, and Emma Hayes is going to have to get creative. We saw a player like Korbin Albert come into the game. She scored an absolute banger of a goal, which ended up being the match winner for the United States. What do you think Emma Hayes is going to do with the midfield against this Japan team?
You know, it really depends if she tries to do something different defensively. If Emily Sonnet moves in that midfield, I'm going to guess she's going to play as a center back still. So maybe Korbin Albert is the one. I don't know. When you think about your number sixes in those positions, especially the way that they play, I don't know that she thought she was going to need to make a change in that moment in this game. So now she's stuck with a task that could have been unavoidable for me. I personally, I think this is a mistake on Emma Hayes' part, right? I didn't know prior to this game that Sam Coffey was on the yellow card. So it's
but a yellow 3 minutes in.
I know. This is why I said
yellow's a yellow. You know what I mean? Especially when
silly.
you can't get one.
Right, but against
it's too much of a risk to take.
I get it, but it's a team that's parking the bus for about an hour or so.
Yeah, and where she made the foul is not dangerous. That's what I said before. It's like it's not you as a player. You clearly know that you're in this position, so you got to be sort of weary of, where you're making tackle. If you're saving a goal, it's a different story, right? You lay your body on the line and you make a play, you save a goal. Okay,
my question is that on Hayes?
Well, she took a risk. Yeah. Emma Hayes is the one who took the risk. And she knew, and it didn't work out for her.
I feel like there's a certain level of inexperience that she has. Sam Coffey at this level, not.
I thought you meant Emma Hayes. I was like, yeah, that's
clearly not. Just 3 minutes in, it was totally avoidable.
100%. The whole thing is avoidable.
Right.
But Tony also mentioned
the
ref was calling the game a little tight, too. Like, a lot of things went into that, but that's the risk.
A team that's parking the bus, you got to have a little bit of that know-how. All right, let me let this foul go by 3 minutes in.
That's my point. It's a silly foul. I said that's the first thing I said. It's a silly foul. She shouldn't be in that position. I mean, she's fouling her from behind. It's not in a dangerous area. You're kind of almost running towards the sideline, so let that one go. You have to know you're on a yellow card. And again, Emma Hayes knew that this was a risk going into it.
You wouldn't have played her, is what you're saying.
Me, I wouldn't have played her in this. Not if I knew the quarterfinals. It doesn't erase till the quarterfinals, so now she's going to miss one game anyway, and it would be the same thing in the end. She'll play hopefully in the semifinals, but yeah, it's a risk that didn't work out.
You never want to lose a key player that's part of your spine. And now as the U.S. gets set for Japan, I'm just curious where you guys are all at in your early outlooks of this matchup, Alexis.
I mean, you guys bring up a great question. Does Emily Sonnet come up? Does maybe Emma Hayes try to maybe a double pivot in absence of Sam Coffey, which now affects your midfield and your front three? I personally, there's a lot of questions where my hope would have been you go into Japan with the same 11 that's banging on all cylinders, and now that's not possible, and maybe there's a shift in formation, which I don't want to see.
But she's not, from the indications, I think, the 3 group stage games, Emma Hayes wants to play her team.
Yeah, and to be honest,
as little as possible.
The way Korbin Albert came in and played, it seemingly you could play a single pivot there in place of Sam Coffey. So for me, I'm fine. I think with a team like Japan, who's so good at keeping the ball, so good at getting players out of position, my hope would have been you have your best 11. But with that front three, I still think there's moments of magic, and they're just so good and clinical that I think Japan will pose a tough test, but I think the U.S. will be fine.
Possibly moving, there's another option with Sonnet in the midfield and not starting Korbin Albert. Casey Kruger doesn't usually play center back for the U.S., plays in either of the wing back roles, but she does play center back.
What are you, her agent? This is the second show in a row you're trying to get her into the
Hey, she was good when she came on yesterday, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's options. Not too many, but there's options.
There's options, but that's also shortened squad, and you have a lot of players that can play in similar positions. I wouldn't be shocked to see Crystal Dunn in there. She can literally play any position on the pitch.
Who knows? Yeah. Emma Hayes, that's her job to figure out